commands to the exercise on these shared Google Docs. If that helps you to follow through. And for this first exercise, the first couple of commands is something that we've not talked about, but we will do so. Make this big. But this is what we did initially, and I did it because on our Mac OS, I created an image. I downloaded an image for Alpine Linux, and then I ran that as a container. So I was able to do what I did, and even though it looks like we installed stuff, it actually didn't.
Did you share the link?
It's on this Google folder, Google Doc, which I think we all have access to.
I don't.
You should ask Tony. Make sure you have access to this Google Doc. It's the course Google Doc, NGS Bioinformatics 2024. Tony says that we all have access to it.
Yes, you guys should all have access.
So Google Docs. So I'm temporarily pasting these commands here. I'll remove them and I'll put them. I'll store them properly in the course directory. But I'm just going through this aspect here. And then these are the steps that I'm trying to go through to try that first exercise. But this was more for demonstration. I don't expect you to necessarily do this. Neither do I think it's very productive. But if you ever find yourself in such an environment, then that might be something. So this is the exercise around installing Conda, mini Conda. But I think the right thing is to simply go to paste this here. I think the right thing is to simply visit this website and follow the instructions on that website. That's another way. And that website is this one here. It's the mini Conda website. And depending on the environment or your operating system of choice, either of these three,
just emailed it to everybody.
You can just simply follow these instructions. So for people on Windows, you can use Carl and run this. To be honest, I've never done this on Windows, so I'm just hoping that it will work. This seems to work. I did this morning, setting up my environment today, and this worked.
Access.
And so at the end of the day, for this session, I'm just going to wait to ensure that we all are on the same page, because each of us has Conda installed in their home directory, or on their computer. So let me know if you have been in the challenges. Oh, sorry. Okay. So it's 11. I've got a couple of more exercises to carry out. Exercise 3. But as we're doing that, I'll try and go through sort of a recap. A recap of our talk as we are doing. So I'm assuming that you're either on a web browser, so you can install Anaconda, mini Conda rather. We don't want to install the whole Anaconda. It can get really big. It's unnecessary. What we want is the mini Conda version, so that we get access to this Conda environment. So this is sort of a recap really, but I think it's important, although I've highlighted most of what I wanted to say, or So what is the main problem? Okay, we want to avoid dependency hell, because I want to install or to run software A, which depends on B, C, and D, and B depends on E and F, and C depends on G and H, and D D depends on I and J. And we saw that, an illustration of that this morning. What do we want to do? What is the solution to this? It's package management. And it turns out that there are several package managers depending on the task, the operating system, and in some instances, what we are doing. Okay, so we could make use of this package manager here, Anaconda, which has Miniconda with it. I tried to show us that illustration of the universe. Maybe I should have copied it here as well. But essentially, it is aimed at simplifying package management. And when you install Anaconda, you're going to get Python and all the scientific packages very well created. The language agnostic package manager and environment manager called Conda. And if you don't need all those Python packages and you have limited disk storage, we really want to work with the Miniconda. Miniconda will give you Python, will also give you the Conda environment, which is what we really want to work with. So it turns out that Conda has thousands of available packages that you could simply install. And these packages are often binaries. So you don't need to run the whole compilation issue with it. And for this to work, it turns out that there are this concept of channels, which are basically repositories for storing these packages. And we'll see later on in our practical, we'll see how we configure our code environment to take advantage of these channels. So this particular channel called Biocoder that has a lot of bioinformatics software installed or rather available. So pretty much everything as a bioinformatician you need will be the Biocoder channel. And you have CodaForge, which has other tools. As I mentioned, the tool works for a broad range of people, and therefore you also need these dependencies to build your Biocoder utilities. And there is an order through which these channels are searched by the Coda command. This sort of a hierarchy, and it's an important one. So this is an old, I think, graph here showing sort of popularity of particular packages. At the time, some tools and HTSLib and all those tools, mostly used in NGS analysis, had loads and loads of downloads in the Biocoder. And because of this, it turned out that dependency management is not trivial, it's really difficult. And as you install more tools, as you install virtual environments, you're going to have a really large directory. And the tool needs to figure out what dependencies are already available on the system. And in some instances, it does something called caching, which is simply, you don't want to download a tool every other time. Okay, so sometimes it will download and keep them in a specific directory, so that if you need the same tool and has not been updated in the main repository, it will simply pull from that directory. And therefore, your Miniconda directory can balloon and grow over time. And that presents a problem because the Coda tool needs to transverse all that directory to know whether a tool is installed or not, and the dependencies around it. It turns out to be quite a difficult task. And so the community came up with a solution to it. And I don't know whether this was inspired partly by the going-ons within Python. I don't know how many of us remember Python 2.7 and the migration to Python 3, which I think was, I think it's okay to say was a catastrophe. But some people may differ. But it was difficult because a lot of tooling existed for Python 2.7, and a lot of changes were made when the decision to go to Python 3 was hatched, and a lot of things remained unresolved, and it took quite a bit to have Python 3 gain acceptance. But now I think it's, it has. So rather than interfere with Conda, these guys developed a new tool called Mamba, which is a replacement for Conda, actually. And it is quite nice in the sense that it does help a lot of elevate a lot of issues that were available with Conda, and therefore I've also shared the instructions on how to install that tool, and it'll just make our work literally really fast. So Mamba is a drop-in replacement for Conda, and it's much quicker. You could install it within the Conda environment using Mamba install and then Mamba create, but that is no longer recommended. So this slide's a little bit old. You'll use the method that I've shown us to install Mamba. So you don't want to install it within the Conda environment. And it uses this library to resolve the dependencies and to sort out your all-in-one environments. So what is Conda and what are Conda environments? Essentially, Conda itself, command is an environment manager, and it leverages on this concept of environment to create these sandboxes or virtual spaces that separate independent installations on the same computer. So you can have multiple Python versions running on the same system. You can have multiple versions of the same tool running on the same system. And the way it works is simply, yesterday Peter talked about the path variable. Conda literally just works by modifying the path variable and pointing it to where the tool is installed. And therefore, the environment makes it really easy to install software. It's also possible to have software that requires multiple versions and dependencies. And the default environment, once you install it, is called base. So maybe I might want to stop there. Maybe just show us what I mean by that in that instance. So I have Conda installed here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to insert this container. And since I have Conda installed, I have this base command telling me that I'm within sort of a Conda environment, and I am in the base environment. Okay, so that's sort of your default environment. So once you set up Conda and it's working well, and you can run the command Conda, and you see loads and loads of instructions. I have to be honest, I don't know all of them. I've not used all of them, but you don't need all these tools to be productive. Okay, so it's just a subset of these tools, and you're off to the races. And you can do a lot of advanced stuff with this tool. And so we only gonna just barely scratch the surface, just sufficient to make us productive. So, and I think we'll mostly work around activate and create and deactivate and the info, and there are a lot of other things that and each of these command takes some subcommands with it. But as we learned, all the documentation that are for this tool are available here. So, for example, I think if I wanted to know Conda activate and I do H, it's going to pull out help pages or the manual pages for this subcommand. Okay, so if you don't know what the arguments are and what you need to do, there is documentation. So on the top page telling usage, Conda activate, then you give it the environment name or prefix, and it's going to create the environment for us. So that's the base environment. We'll come to how to actually create these environments. And essentially, you can have your environment. Now we have Conda installed, and you could choose one of these two, how you want your environment to really look like. Okay. And my really thing about this is I usually ask people like, I want you to look at your desktop, right? Some of us store all our documents and files in the desktop folder, don't we? Okay. Wait until your computer crashes and you can't recover your desktop folder, right? And everything, and the reason it happens is because it's really easy, it's quick. I love it, it's on there, we've got a really nice icon in the image, but kindly, if you're already doing that, please avoid it. There's a folder called documents within your file, and you can store things in there and arrange them neatly in folders and subfolders, and have sort of a clean environment for you. So if let's see. Yeah. So what we want to do as we go along is to avoid this. Don't install tools in your base environment. Okay. You could but make sure they are minimal. They are just basic. Maybe something that is small and cross-cuts across what you're doing. But avoid really to create and install all your tools in your base environment, because you're going to run into the whole problem that we're trying to escape from, which is dependency hell and conflicts between software installations. Okay, so I try to keep my base environment clean. Indeed, I try not to install any tool at all on my base environment, and instead I'll try and create a different environment. So Conda does help us to solve a problem, but not without some limitations, right? So, we got issues in terms of, differences in the dependency resolution between platforms. Okay, so we want to produce or make reproducible research, and, the golden thing, or what we really want to achieve is to do this and make it really, really reproducible. But you can imagine if I'm working on a Linux environment and some of my colleagues working in a Windows environment or Mac OS environment, there are certain dependencies that we can't really resolve simply because of the architecture of those two different operating systems. And therefore, you could argue that Conda is not really cross-platform. You're not going to get match for match environment if you're working across platforms. If I have an environment, I have an Ubuntu machine, and I've installed Conda, and my colleague has also an Ubuntu machine installed Conda. We can get much closer to, a similar or near identical environment. There will be some subtle differences, but maybe they're not sufficient to cause us worry. In some instances, you can have issues if you're on Windows environment, because the tooling and the compilation will be different, and that can have issues, particularly if you want very granular floating point calculations and sometimes speed. So you can have identical environment. And therefore, this argument that it doesn't necessarily solve this idea, that it works on my machine, so it's going to work on your machine. Okay, there will be subtle differences, but we try to minimize those differences. So let's go back to the tutorial that we had, and I just wanted to know whether all of us been able to do this installation. That all of us have that working, and then we'll delve. Okay, maybe I should show us this image. So this is what I meant by, the Conda environment. So once you have mini Conda, assuming that you have that installed, you have this sort of directory structure. Maybe I'll pull out my mini Conda directory, but this is the simplification of it, right? So you have the bin folder, that keeps all the key binaries, the coda, deactivate, and all the subcommands are in there. Some metadata and meta commands will be stored in the meta, and the environments. The envs folder has your environment. So in this case here, there's a tutorial, there's PySam, SAM2, SnakeMain as environment, and each of those virtual environments have their dependencies and so on and so forth. And you've got a host of other directories that are essential for running this environment. So how does it work? Let's see. So our third exercise was about. So I walked through it. Was about creating an environment and just learning and visualizing that environment. So the way we do it is using the create command with -n or a double hyphen name. So in most Unix, Linux commands, the single letter flags are often prefixed by just a slash. But if you want the full one, it's often double slash and then the full name. Okay, so another way to run this would be coda create sort of hyphen name, and then you create your environment. You can name it whatever. For purpose of our teaching, I've just named this new n. Once you create it, you're going to activate that environment, and then we can deactivate the environment. But let's see how that looks like. So I'm gonna switch away from this and go back to our terminal. So there we are. And I hope this is visible. Okay. So Win-based environment, we want to create a new environment, and the way we're going to do it is that now we have the coda command, and we simply going to create. It can be something like I'll give it a name -n. Let's do what we did earlier. Okay, no, let's just start with this first. So I'm gonna say so to blow this a little bit, so close here. Yep, so I'll call it view. Okay. And we can do enter, and you can see that it's already prepending. Some channels will come to that, and it's going to then try and create that. And once it prepends us with this information, it's asking us whether we should proceed. So our new environment will be in this location, okay? So which is basically our environment, Miniforge n. And if I'm happy with it, and the reason it's gone to Miniforge 3 is because I installed Miniforge. Okay? But I can change that if I don't want it to go there. But let's go with the default. So I'll say yes, and it carried what they call a transaction. I don't know whether to go into that term there, but anyway, it's going to carry out what they call a transaction, and then the environment is arrived, or it's been created, but it's not available to us yet. Okay, so I need to say coda, I need to activate it, activate new n. And And now you can see that the prompt is changed and now within my virtual environment. Okay, so I can install tools, I can do everything, I can work, and what I do in here is completely isolated from my operating system, in the sense that I'm not interfering with system utilities and system tools. This will be an environment that I can work with, I can take that folder and I can share with someone. And I can install all my tools within this environment. So one of the things we can do here, I can do this. I want to see what Python command not found. Yeah, I don't have Python installed in there. I didn't give what the base Python was. And I can do Python. Okay, so it's going to again install Python in this environment, and the Python in this environment is separate. So again, you can see all the dependencies are being filled in here, and it's also telling me the size of this once it's all completed. Okay, so for some reason I'll just say yes, and then it will do that.
George,
Yes, please.
so does it like automatically install the latest?
Yes,
So
by default,
package
yes,
or
yeah,
by
yeah,
default?
yeah. If you don't give the version,
Okay.
yeah. But I could provide a version of Python that I'm happy to work with.
Okay.
Yes. So that has worked, and that's all great. So maybe now we can do Python. I think if I do my speak after this, I'm able to see that I got Python 3.12.2. Yes, please.
Yeah, just a question. Since creating the, when you created the environment, you gave it the path to the environment, so it's like a directory. Is it possible that, let's say, someone needs, or you need to run something in that particular environment, you can just copy that folder onto a different machine that has, say, Conda installed, and it will still run, or is it going to work?
No, it may not work because of the different architectures sometimes in the tooling. What is recommended is to export your environment file. Yeah, and we'll see how to do that. Because then once I export that environment, I can just share with you, and then you can execute Conda create and then provide the environment, and then it's going to reinstall and install all your tools. And that's the recommended way. Otherwise, not. Yeah, that's not that good way. We might have issues. Okay. So we've done that. That means we can run on Python and get to the prompt and do Python magic. And if we go to our directory structure, let's see if I can go there. Try to come over here. And you can see within my environment, there was the folder for mini Conda. I think this is a good difference. And this is what we have. We got our environment, but you can see that when I installed Mamba and Miniforge, it actually created something very similar to Conda and the same directory structure. Okay. And because of that, and I now have the same setup, but my environments actually live under this Miniforge. Okay, and now my environment is here, and you can see that it's very self-contained, but all the binaries are in here, and whatever I do and all my includes and software-related tooling will all be stored in here. Okay, so let's see what happens when we exit this. So the way to exit is to run Conda deactivate. So if I run Conda deactivate, it takes me back to the base environment. Okay, so I've now sort of exited that virtual environment. I'm back to base, and I can now create another environment. So let's try that. So the first time we created a virtual environment and we installed Python, but we could do the same. But I'm gonna do something else in Visual, I believe. So Conda create. Conda create. And I'm gonna, let's say for some legacy reasons, I know on my tool I use Python version 3. I don't use whatever I want. I use V. I'm just gonna do 2.7. Okay. And I'm gonna give Python equals 2.7. Okay. And then create that. So what I've done is to try and create a new environment, but this time round I've specified okay, some packages now found for available. Okay, maybe I tried too much. So I've not set up my channels so that would work. I was to come to the channels in the next tutorial. Okay, so that would work. But for demonstration purposes, what I'll do is I'll just create another environment, but I'll not prepare the Python. I'll create it here, proceed, and then I can do the activate. And now it's changed. It can tell me that I'm within that environment. Let's see what happens when you try to install Python. Install Python 7. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that seems to work. Yeah, that won't work either because I've not selected the channels, which is a good idea. So essentially, we'll come to this and we'll try and sort out that thing once we set up the channels. Yeah. I should have added the channels at the top. Yeah. So the next tutorial was about setting up the channels and configuring the channels. So I'm kind of running ahead of myself. But for demonstration purposes, the idea is that if we now look at our folder here, and we go to our M's, you can see now we have another isolated environment. Okay? So each of those is isolated sandboxes, so you can run your data, you can run all your work, and you can have as many as you want. And now dependencies are very separate. They're all contained within those environments. And if you don't need an environment, you can always remove it using the Conda remove -n command, and it will get rid of that environment. So again, we run Conda deactivate. And that takes us back to this. Okay, so what can we do? Right. So I'll copy this our shared directory. So let's do something. So earlier on we installed BWA the hard way, but let's try and see if we can do it the more simpler way. So we're going to create, to solve the problem that we started with using Conda. We're going to create a new environment. It's going to be BWA for our work, we activate it, and for us to really install this tool, we need to set up the channels. So I did mention about channels, which are these repositories where tools are already deposited, and we want to, pull them and make them available to our environment. One of them being via Conda and Coda Forge. So I'll paste this later on, but let's just follow through this basic tutorial here. And what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna so when I'm in base, I can run Coda config show channels. And the only channel that I have is Coda Forge. Okay. So if I want to install any of the bioinformatics tools, it won't work because I need to tell Coda to set up these channels, okay, or where to pull up things. It's like, telling someone the location of the supermarket, or, and we can do that. So we can do that at the top level by configuring these channels. And one way to do it is to say Coda config prepared and channels. Via Coda. Okay. And now, if I run my previous command, now via Coda has been prepared. So I've configured my environment. I've told it that don't just go to this shop. There's an extra shop. If you don't find stuff in here, you can find it in this supermarket. Okay.
So George,
Yes.
let me just to add context to what you have done.
Yeah.
You can go to the Conda page.
Yeah.
So that you can just see what that way we can follow through. So just
Conda.
Conda. So let's see what you're doing.
In here?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
You can see the list of the package browser.
What's that?
Browser package.
Oh, right. In search packages here. Browse
No,
packages.
just on the browser packages.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is, I think, what he has done there in the command line is simply to put this address for this page we are seeing here. So this page we are seeing, if you read through, has over, I think, 7,000 bioinformatics packages or tools that are deposited there. They're all there available for use.
Yeah.
If you check from 1 to 3 up to X, Y, Z, all of those are different tools that you can use. And if you click on each, it will tell you what that tool is. For example, click on applicant.
We
Yeah,
will
so
work
that
with
is
applicant at some
you can
point.
read about it and its dependencies. So when he added the channels, he simply put in layman's words, I can say he puts the address to this page, okay, which is in the other language, it's a channel, like where the Conda or mamba would be downloading or picking the tool that you choose to use. And so that is exactly what he was doing that side. Initially, it couldn't work because there was no address for where to get the tools from.
Yeah.
But now he's added the address, so that now it's going to work because Conda knows where to get the package from.
Yeah.
And I think for George, for
Go on.
us, naming is going to be That's why some of us coming from the biomedical background, their computers are, we won't use them for Excel and Word. Quite difficult. But I think with this, it's kind of easy to appreciate. Yeah, so at this point, we have the Conda, which is, in other words, is your like download manager or something like that. And then we put in now the address where Conda will be, going to download the packages.
Yeah.
And just before that, George was creating an environment. So in other words, it's like an environment was like maybe like the way this classroom is. Yeah, it's like you have this classroom and it's open, which is like a base environment. There's nothing. So then he partitioned it, like divided it into a small environment, which he called new environment. So in the new environment, there was basically nothing there. So now you want to add the tables, the chairs, the projector, and whatnot, which is now the step where you go to this shop, buy the tables, buy the projectors, and bring them in this classroom. And I think that's the part where we are now. We have the shop, we know the shop where to go and buy, we know what we want to buy, and we know where we want to come and take those items. So in this case, if we follow what it's doing, we are going to take, we are going to be putting the items we are getting into the room we call new environment. And that's, I think, brings us to the point where we are now. But yeah, that's maybe to put it in plain language. It's helpful.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, that's very nice explanation. Yeah, so so now we know where the tools are, as we've just been explained.
And the reason for all this is, I think if you remember the first step that he did, where he was trying to install the tool and getting an error as not found. Okay, that is the biggest problem that the Conda or Mamba solves for us. So each tool that you want to install, like we saw as other dependencies that so the dependencies are like additional software that is required for that tool to run. Okay, but for example, some software requires specific versions of another tool for it to run. So what they've done is the Conda then helps you to carry all these dependency software that is required, and then carry them along, so that when you install it on your computer, it won't tell you that I can't find this, I need this, I can't find it on your computer. So now it's coming as a package, and that's, I think, where the name package comes from, because it's coming as a package with all the software and everything with it. So right now, if it pulls up BWA, it's picking BWA with all the software and the dependencies that the BWA requires for it to run. But then he was saying he was creating a new environment for it, so that some software may interfere with the operation of other software. And the reason now we have the environments, so that if I put one package in one environment and I put another in different environments, they are already separate, and there will be no interference. So when I put, so it's now Mamba install BWA. So BWA is coming with all its software into its own environment. He has called BWA Inv. So that Inv will be like the room with all the necessary things required by BWA. And I think he's done one interesting thing here. If we've noticed, for each It started with Python 5.3.7 and Python 2.7. He was creating a separate environment for each of those. And that's one very good practice where you don't put tools in the same environment because you have those interferences.
Yeah.
They either slow down your computer or get crashed. So it's always good to create a separate environment, preferably for each separate tool that you are running. It's easier that way for yourself to remember.
George,
Thanks. Yes, please.
like for instance, because you've created like an environment, how, let's say you have a lot of things going on, how do you remember which, like how do you show them, like how do you
So these are commands, Conda show M's.
Okay.
You can list all your environments but I showed you another way. Just browse it. You know where it is and just graphically you can see them if you want to, but you can also use a command line to find them. So so I was in the base environment and I set up the channels. So I like setting those channels early on, and those channels when you do the config get set in a specific file, which I think is a Conda.rc file that lives somewhere within your home environment. It's a dot file, and it gets read whenever you try to create a new environment. So what I've done here, I've created a new environment for this BWA, and I've called it BWN, and I've tried to show the channels, and you can see that now that I'm within the BWA, I already set the channels. My biocoder channel is available. Okay. So and then the other thing is that I did set up mamba. We say that mamba is a drop-in replacement of Conda, works much faster, and we can try and use it. And something happens. Now look, this is real fancy, isn't it? It's doing all this in parallel. Okay. And does not exist, or type is missing. Okay, so it looks like we can promise you BW does not exist. So what's that?
The channels.
Yeah, so let's add more channels here.
No, for Mamba you need to specify the channel.
The Conda forge, but Conda forge is already there.
I mean, in the command for installing -C, you are supposed to put the command.
So there we go.
So you did -C,
Oh, -C.
and then you put the channel.
That's -C biocoder, right? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's the number.
No, it's not happy. Does barcode actually, does PWA live in barcode, or it has a different name? Alright, we can just browse it.
And you have it in the browser in your
No, you did specify the
in your web browser. It's the
or the environment name.
packages.
No, I'm already in the BWA environment.
Well, you still need to change the name. So,
There's different tabs.
Actually, it doesn't exist here. Oh, it's there. Package BWA. So let's click on it and see how to install it.
So George, you need to add the name of the environment.
The name of the
The name of the environment.
not within that, in the sense that I'm within the environment itself. So I'm within BWN.
It still needs to. So add n minus n BW dash
to add a channel Conda config -add channel.
So we already configured this.
No, view Conda na
Unless my mamba is not working correctly or it's not installed correctly.
We have this issue though.
George,
Yes,
George, can you list
I tried
Yeah,
to create
the
one.
channel?
let me just do this one last. I just want to verify that my mamba is properly configured because it could be that it's not properly configured. You can see the difference between mamba and Conda. Conda is taking a switch time, and still gonna run into that issue again. So what are you suggesting? I'm gonna come across this, sorry. Package is not found in the current channel, and do we have the channels listed properly? So let's just explain here. I'm gonna refresh the order of channels. I'm gonna refresh the order of channels.
You want to use mini vacs in your software with PWA.
Yes.
I think it was something that there was a crash to the version of mamba or Conda and but I know we had the exact issue when we tried to bring this with last year. I'm just asking Pete if you remember how we solved it, but we had to downgrade something.
Right. It's just said I've never had an issue before,
Yeah.
but now it looks like it is an issue. So what to do? I can then set this in there and install mamba. Try and do that separately.
So apparently even package managers can do this.
There you go.
And then you see
Who knew?
because just do the bioinformatics.
That's what they tell you. That's what they told us. Isn't it? Just do your
Your
bioinformatics.
part is easy.
I didn't expect that, but it turns out there's an issue. You're setting up mamba. So what I'll do will actually do mamba. Let's see if I can go.
Let's see. It's good.
Yeah, that's the same reason. Right.
Job.
So I'm setting up my environment shortly.
Yeah, for my, I run it.
It
I
works.
have been using it before.
Yes.
But I don't know, it's just probably you can check it out. I think when you created the environment, although I know you can use mamba and Conda interchangeably in some of the commands, but I think you created the environment with Conda and then try to install with mamba. I don't know if
No.
it should work. It should work.
Because mamba is installed globally
Yeah.
and it works with the Conda.
Okay.
But in this instance, there seems to be a conflict. So I'm just going to do it. Let me see if that works.
Are you using Mamba or Conda or with the Mamba solver? What are you using?
I was using mamba.
Let me try to create a from scratch Conda with the latest Conda downloaded from.
That's what I'm doing again. That's what I did. Like it was a fresh install.
So I don't know if we went into the whole thing that Conda and Mamba are now converging in a way.
Yes, I used the mini forge instructions where they say, like
I'm trying
reinstall
to
it.
remember which is the mini forge is the one that comes from Conda Forge, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me try to start from zero with that as well.
Okay. So
And what does BioConda recommend these days? So everything has changed in the last year.
I did note that is it that they are replacing Coda per se with the mini forge, the same directory structure.
Okay, so I
Conda
see
seems
that
to right? That seems to work now. So, set
there's probably one mini forge, okay. So George, so starting from
just install it so just gonna reset it. I'm not gonna install Mamba the fastest.
No. Because the latest Conda, the very latest, and I can't remember which version they added into, uses libmamba as the solver. So effectively it's using the mamba solver.
Oh.
So you don't need mamba
So you
anymore.
don't need Mamba anymore. That's it.
But it's literally changed in the last few months.
Okay, that would explain.
But
Because it was
I find the blog post where they know it's changed.
That's
I don't know
expensive.
which meeting it is.
That explains it.
I don't know if it does explain it, but solving these things is last year we had some people it worked, some people it didn't work. It was crazy. But let me have a look.
So there's some
So we're x86. X56.
Conda installed. Those instructions worked as it is, but there sounds like there's a problem with the most recent version of Conda. So the solution again would be for me to remove it and then either downgrade. But it does sound like this is how you'd just going back to our course, this is essentially the way you do it. And it should ideally work. I think if you have the lower version of Conda, but Peter and I will try and troubleshoot, see what the issue is. So Peter is trying to reproduce the issue. But the point that I wanted to illustrate was that relative to what we did earlier today, this is a much cleaner, easier way to run your installation. And for those that it has worked, now you'd have your BWA tool. You don't need to worry about the binaries, the dependencies, and so on. And on top of it, this is in its own isolated environment. And then you can do some work. And the next slide, maybe we'll cover that in the afternoon, was about how do we share our environments. So we want to do reproducible science and have a stack of tools that I've installed in my environment, and I want to share it with someone else. And for that, we're going to follow this tutorial here, which is the software carpentry, that has quite a nice outline. So for now, that way we're just coming to the end with this practical. My Conda environment is a bit damaged, so I'm going to try and sort it out, see what the problem is. But that was towards the end of this tutorial, so just try and sort it out, and hopefully we can go with it after the session on how to share those environments, and then I don't know whether to introduce it or not. We'll see.
CPU architecture, right, George? I
You
mean,
did mention about
like
CPU
like we never want to have this conversation because it gets too deep into things. Okay, so the chip inside your phone is very similar to the chip inside George's laptop. Okay, and it's quite different to the chip inside this laptop and apparently inside this laptop. Okay, because the chips that are inside your Dell is the Intel CPU architecture. Okay, even if it's made by a different company like AMD or something like that, mine has got a chip made by AMD. It is still called the Intel architecture. And what that means is that deep down inside the computer, I will show you guys yesterday what does a binary look like on the screen. It was like all this nonsense. Okay, to you that's nonsense, but to a computer chip, that is a language. Okay. It is a binary language, but for many years, almost all of our computers have shared the same chip. Okay, then Mac. Well, then these guys came out. Okay, and they use a different type of chip. I think called an ARM chip. Okay, and Mac took an advanced version of the ARM chip and they made their new Macs on it. Okay, so where does that leave us? Okay. Now your Conda packages have been compiled, in other words, made into binaries before you ever use them. So you showed them compiling, right,
Yes,
George?
yes.
You showed, so George showed you guys how to go from the source code to the compiled code and how quite time-consuming and tedious that is, right? But the problem is that with the latest Macs, so every Conda package has to be pre-prepared, and they had not been pre-prepared for the ARM architecture, which causes problems, not just for George, but for several other people. And Stanislaw, in our workshop, you've had this problem as well.
Yeah.
Okay. The good news is that the announcement came out yesterday, and I think you explained that Conda has channels, right?
Yes.
So there's different projects. So the people of the Conda Forge project, which is not a bioinformatics project, but it's a general computing project, made the change to make their packages available for ARM a few months ago. Okay. But the thing is also now you get ARM on a Linux machine running ARM on a Mac. Okay. BioConda has historically decided to support Mac and Linux, okay, but only with the Intel computers. So you can see with this starting talks, we're starting to talk like a matrix here. Are you Linux? Are you Mac? Are you ARM? Are you Intel? Okay, so all of these different boxes must be ticked. Okay. BioConda has just announced that they are now supporting. They're starting support for ARM chips, but only on Linux, okay? the support for Max and ARM will come next. What this means for those of us who work on the side of, like myself, and I don't know, George, have you contributed to Bioconda before?
No.
I've contributed quite a few packages to Bioconda. What that means is that I've helped write the code to automate packaging the thing. For those of us who are packaging these things, we have to go and make some small changes, and then they recompile things. And they estimated that to recompile letters, and when you change between the one type of chip and the other type of chip, there can be some subtle problems that show up. So you have to put a bit of work into their packaging. So in other words, they can't automatically change things. But even if they could automatically change things, the estimate was that to recompile everything in the Bioconda collection would take something on the order of, if you did it on Amazon Cloud, $8,000 US. So they had to raise some money for resources and things like that. So the project is underway, but at the moment, it's quite challenging to use Conda on a new Mac, like this one and that one. But when you get to containers, you'll show how it works perfectly, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the issue so if you are on an Intel Mac like this one, or if you are on a Linux machine, including the WSL Linux inside Windows, then it works. Which I think most of you guys have had it working, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, back to
Thanks,
George.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
That solves it. It just hit me. And my Intel laptop, because I refused to get the ARM laptops, and then it crashed over December. So this is a temporary Mac that I borrowed and was graciously given. So I'm setting it up, and probably that's why that never crossed my mind. That they are not supporting. Yeah, but that goes back to the original discussions that we had about how difficult sometimes all this can be, and what considerations you need to take in place. So it does look like if you're on an ARM architecture, Coda tools will take a little bit of time to compile. So often as bioinformaticians, and although I do work on Mac, you've seen those guys who like wear one jersey and then they got another one inside. So I'm one of those guys. So I wear like Linux underneath, but I carry Mac around simply for convenience. So most of my work environment really is Linux. But I for a long time I struggled just getting the right computer that I can carry around, easy to package, long power, whatever. But I did insist on having Intel computers, but now I got an ARM one. So thanks to Peter for pointing that out, and that gave an issue. And I just sort of tried it out here. So over here, as you can imagine, I'm trying to do something just to reproduce the issue.
Can you make it a bit bigger, please?
What was that?
Can you make it a bit bigger, please?
Yes, you can make it bigger. So what I've done here is try to, not sure that's visible. So again, you can see that I tried to do some tools. Again, it fails as you'd expect. And here again, I pre-specify the channels. Still, it can't find it. And over here, I do the same. Still can't find it. And then down here, I was like, maybe there's an issue. I tried to install Python 3, meaning that if I find this, it means that my Coda thing is working. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. And Python 3.10 is there. But if I try to do Python 2.7, I don't find it. It will be surprising because I doubt whether they have the ARM version of Python 2.7 as well. We could check and see which tools are already supporting ARM architecture. But then maybe we can do that later. Nice to know that we got an issue which hopefully will be addressed or is being addressed currently. So what I wanted us to do, yes, sorry.
I think in a way, always unfortunate this is happening, but in a way too, I think it's something probably we need to look at how to communicate to non-bioinformaticians for issues like this. I mean, when it comes to say an institute, when it comes to procurement of hardware, is you will say, oh, I need this particular with the specifications, and you'll be like, well, that's not what we budgeted for, this and that. And then that's on the purchase aspect. And then on the analysis aspect, you have this issue of encountering these challenges, these roadblocks each time. For example, it's just Conda. We haven't even started actual analysis, but we are facing these challenges whose roots is going deep even towards the hardware level. So how do we communicate this effectively to non-bioinformaticians who expect us to, magically do something with an analysis? Let's say an analysis is delaying, and this is the problem we are facing.
Yeah.
How do you communicate it? Because people will be like, I give you the data a week ago or something, and you have to explain, and it just seems that you are spinning stories and all that. So I think
I get what you're saying. Yeah. So let me give you the nightmare scenario. You just got a new appointment, and you're fresh bioinformaticians. You've been given a list of things that you should. And the PI just received a new grant, and they've budgeted $3,000 for a computer, a high-end computer for the bioinformatician. And there you go and you look at the newest Mac, and you order it. And now here we are, it can't work. Right? So again, it just means you really need to think about it. My default, I'll come to you. My default always, and I do this a lot of times, and I've advised our institute, is always go for Linux. Okay, I've never advised our group to buy Macs or to buy Windows. I do advise them, and I say, we got our base solution in Linux, and I've always, this is my bias, but also based on the experience, Red Hat derived operating systems work with, but now there's another issue with Red Hat derived systems since Red Hat got bought by IBM, and they did away with one of the most stable distributions, which was CentOS. And CentOS was forked to Arma Linux and Rocky Linux, but then Red Hat has gone ahead and said, well, we're not going to support binary compatibility with Rocky Linux and Arma Linux. And therefore, what it means is that people who are on Arma Linux and Rocky Linux are charting their own path. One of the largest scientific providers and supporter of CentOS, which is a Large Hadron Collider, who provide scientific Linux, which was based on CentOS, are still going to continue providing it, but that's something else you got to take into consideration. I don't know, Peter, do you know that?
We've been gone to a few years ago. Just and in fact for PCs, I typically, because some students were complaining about not having MS Word around to write their theses on and things like that.
Yeah.
We've taken to experimentally using Windows with the Windows subsystem for Linux, WSL, and then Linux inside of that as the standard thing. But what you do, the one downside to that is that you lose half of the RAM on your machine.
Yes. Yeah.
So my Linux, I've got 16 gigs of RAM on my laptop, and my Linux has 8 gigs of RAM. Okay. And for people who don't know the RAM thing, it's about the working space. Like if you imagine that your filing cabinet is your hard drive, your RAM is your desk. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're running bioinformatics programs, I have a fairly good track record of crashing my computer by running bioinformatics analyses because I run out of that only 8 gigs that I've got to play with, Whereas, and if you had an 8 gig computer, I think it would give you less. I don't know how it works exactly, but yeah. So getting the best of all worlds inevitably needs some compromises. And there's some other weirdnesses about WSL, but it works 80% of the time. It works well. I used to use Linux on my laptop for decades though, so it was also a good option. Some people are lucky and they have multiple computers.
How does it compare to the trade-off of just having dual boot?
The other option is dual boot, where you install both operating systems and you choose to boot it to one or the other. I don't know, is anybody here running dual boot?
I don't know.
How's you did?
I did it for a long time until the latest day crashed.
Yeah.
Then I just installed Linux.
The issue that my issue with dual boot is like if you spend all the time in one or the other, when you switch back to the other, then the might not install updates and it can be quite but Conda, you running dual boot? Yeah, so you tend to not use them half and half, right? So it can be.
So what I've done is the windows is like really small.
Okay.
It's like the bigger spaces are the features to like windows is like very small.
Yeah. And Tracy, you were running dual boot, and I think your Linux kind of got corrupted or something, didn't it? Or what happened with your dual boot? I know you were running dual boot for a while as well.
I think I was was very strong something by then I was doing something else and I got it.
Yeah, so it's
we basically just want words, so like Conda said, we just want the smallest amount of space for it because just so that
right word and but it's the other problem is that like with WSL they're meant to integrate with your boot, then often it's difficult to access the Linux files and the Windows files. It's easy to access the other way, but not from I don't think Windows can mount your X3 file system stuff. But yeah. We would wish that computers were easy.
So again, some of us on Mac OS. This is just another thing I wanted to point out. I did mention about package managers, and Conda is one of them, and a workspace manager as well. And here we got it all set up. But I think I do have homebrew set up. So if you're on a Mac OS and you have a homebrew set up, and I try to install tools from homebrew when I'm in a Conda environment base, you're gonna run into conflicts. Okay. But the good thing is that I can deactivate Conda completely on my shell simply by just saying Conda deactivate. And this is going to deactivate the base Conda. And I don't know if I set this up, but I'm gonna try. And let's say brew install WA if it's set up. Can't remember whether that's there. It looks like I set up I set up homebrew. The difference here being that if it does that, you see it's working now, is that this is getting installed in the homebrew package. It's still separated from my operating system tooling because it's going to be within homebrew, but I can get to do things from this end. Okay. So it's fetch PWA, although Conda was not supporting it. Let me see if it actually now works. So I'm just going to clear this up. And if I do this, yeah, there we go. So BWA is still supported on ARM architecture, but not through Conda. So back to your question, what would you do? So you've got to play around with all these sort of solutions. Okay, so I still got it installed, but through homebrew, because homebrew is supporting the ARM architecture of the same tool. Okay, and you can see, and I think this was the point I was trying to illustrate early in the morning, is that although we have these solutions, it is actually quite difficult to install software. It's not that straightforward, and I think what we've just gone through this morning is a testimony to how difficult the whole scenario can be. But I think within the community, and if your network, you know how to make use of resources, I mean, you still can go ahead and get it all set up and still do your work. And then maybe this afternoon we'll see another way to just get around all this whole issue by using containers. And that way I can spin whatever container I need and any distribution that I want, and still be able to carry out my work. Because you realize that some tools will only work within certain operating systems, or they are better supported within certain operating systems. And still you have this opportunity to isolate your work environment. So I think we can go for lunch, and then when we come back, we'll go through a tutorial on carpentries. And for that, I just want to focus mostly on how then do we share our environment. There's so much you can do with Conda, and we can't cover it in a day or two. But as I say, all we want to do is just learn the basics to get us started, and then we can expand from there. You can do a lot more, but definitely we can't cover it. And I personally don't know. I've not really explored the full depth of Conda and what we can do with it. All right, so we'll break for lunch, and then when we come in, we'll go through that carpentries tutorial. And if there's still time, we may go through the containers, or the introduction to it. And then tomorrow we can do a lot more practicals on setting up containers, sharing work and volumes, and that kind of thing. All right, Asante.
What time should we be back?
2 p.m.
Yeah, 2 p.m.